What's going on? I'm Marcus, and you're at the channel of the Debt Free Dad, where we're following my family's journey to financial freedom by eliminating some unnecessary debt. And we're also learning about finance. In this Free Game Friday video, we're going to talk about really two topics, something that's just on my mind, kind of related to finance with one of the topics, but I just wanted to rap about it. First topic we're going to talk about is what is the deal with athletes committing healthcare fraud. We're going to talk a little bit about that area because that area has some is pretty interesting to me. The next thing we're going to talk about is a little bit about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, just kind of what's going on in the marketplace. Now, I know y'all probably seen on the news a lot of stories. A couple of months ago was a gang of NFL players who was committing healthcare fraud, and I think the big name out of that group of people were Clinton Portis, who actually had a chance to meet Clinton Portis once. It was at one of these homecoming for these HBCUs I was at, but he was actually a really cool guy. Uh, Balling, of course, at the time. That was in his peak years playing with the football team. But yeah, so you had that story that came out about NFL players. Now, fast forward, we have the same story that's coming out about NBA players. I think in total they said it was 18 former NBA players who got caught up in healthcare fraud. Now, the reason this is interesting to me is because I think I have a particular set of expertise in this subject matter area. As many of you know, hey, I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. But I spent over a decade in some form of criminal law, be it defense, prosecution, investigations, and I have a specialty in investigating fraud related to federal programs, to include healthcare. So for 6 years, I've actually investigated federal healthcare crimes against providers and other types of cases in that particular arena. So I do have some expertise in this particular area. So the first thing we're going to talk about is athletes, even though they make a lot of money, we all know they don't retain a lot of money. We always hear the data points out there that the average American can't sustain a $400 emergency without going into credit card debt. And you hear that, and a lot of people think, man, that's crazy. That can't be true. Well, those same numbers that are true of the general population are true of athletes who make millions of dollars. If you lined up all of the athletes in the NBA, the NFL, the same percentage of them are going to be living above their means, are going to be heavily in credit card debt. We see these stories all the time. So it looks like in this story, a little bit about the facts. It was 18 former NBA players who got caught up in this fraud scheme. One guy got caught up with his wife. That's a whole nother different story. If I'm gonna do some shady stuff, I'm gonna do it unilaterally on my own. I can't me and the wife can't go down for something crazy, but that's a whole nother story. Now, the total amount that they uh, received from this fraud scheme was $2.5 million. So think about it, $2.5 million. If we divide that by 18 people, that's not a lot of money for people who were in the NBA. But this is essentially the nuts and bolts of how healthcare fraud is investigated and how you actually look into it. Most times with healthcare fraud, you're looking at the providers. So you're looking at the doctors. You're not really looking at the patients. So when you're looking at the doctors, you look at, I always tell everybody, it's called the data, the documents, the discussion, and then everything else, interviews and surveillance. So the data would be Hmm, let's take a look at all of these physicians in this particular area and let's see who had an increase in billing to federal healthcare programs over the year. So, of all the doctors in a particular area, I'm going to run and I want to know what doctors had a substantial increase in the amount of services that they actually billed to a federal healthcare program, because those are going to be kind of red flags. So, a lot of times they start by looking at the doctors. And with the doctors, most time healthcare fraud starts off as a mistake. I maybe said this in another video before, but what often happens is if you look at the article or you read into the story about this, it was one guy who received, who was playing ball in Taiwan at the time. He was supposed to be getting 48,000 worth of root canal and crown services. Stupid. But essentially, what happens is I'm a doctor, and if I get a root canal, I'm supposed to bill it to Medicare or Medicaid under this procedure code A. Procedure code A contains all of the different steps that I did to complete this root canal. Well, what a doctor may do, and this oftentimes happens by accident, instead of billing for procedure code A, that includes all the steps of the root canal, they may actually build for each of the steps for the root canal individually, as opposed to bundling it under that one root canal code. And so instead of, if you bill it under A, which is supposed to get billed under, it includes everything you did. But sometimes they may accidentally pull out everything, the cleaning, the extraction. They may pull out everything and build it individually. Now, it may start out as a mistake, but a lot of times these mistakes don't get caught. So the doctor's like, hey, this mistake didn't get caught. We may could keep doing this and get our paper up. And so that's kind of how these things come into fruition. So they look at the doctors first. So a lot of times you hear about these cases and you think, man, how did these guys do healthcare fraud and get money? It's because the physicians were under investigation. Then through the investigation, they found out that the physicians were actually paying kickback to the players or whoever the individual was, because you need two parties. You need somebody to submit a false, bogus claim to a doctor, and you need a doctor to submit the false claim to get the compensation from the government. So you have to have those two parties to the transaction. And this is the interesting thing. A lot of things, healthcare fraud is so prevalent. If the fraud amount doesn't exceed a certain dollar amount, it may not even be worth the resources to investigate or prosecute. If someone did $30,000 of fraud in a particular program, that may or may not, is a strong chance that that may not get looked at because $30,000 worth of fraud isn't enough. Now, that being said, don't go out there and commit any fraud for a low dollar amount, because I have and I do know prosecutors who like to burn those people on those small dollar amounts just to make sure they're keeping everybody honest as a deterrent. So fast forward, let's talk about it. The person who was the head of this thing is an individual named Terrence Williams. He was the number one, no, number one. He was the number 11 pick in the 2009 NBA draft. He played 4 years in the league and he made 6.9 million in salary. Now we think off the cuff, we thinking like, man, $6.9 million in 4 years, he should be good. But let's put this in the context. He made $7 million in 4 years. Let's go ahead and take 3.5 of that out because it's earned income for taxes. So now you got $3.5 million. Now you got agents you got to pay, people who you have employed with you, you got to pay. You probably balling and doing a whole lot of buying and buying some of the things you. So that money goes fast, fast, fast. Then the other thing we got to realize too is we always see the news people who win the lottery. Man, if I won the lottery, if I hit the Powerball for $20 million, no way I'd be broke. We probably would. Most people would retain their same spending habits no matter the amount of money that they come into. If it's $10,000 or $10 million. So when you think about it in that context, a lot of these NBA players, they're coming in the league 18, 19 years old. They don't have a financial education. A lot of them haven't come from a background where they can get that financial education. So a lot of them have poor spending habits. So let's take a look at some of the other people who got caught up in this. Darius Miles made 62 million. Ruben Patterson made 37 million. Glenn Davis made 34 million. Sebastian Telfair made 19.5 million. I mean, it's just, it was a lot of money sitting out here on the table. But again, even though they made these crazy amount of numbers for salary, they don't even have taxes taken in consideration. They don't have the spending. They don't have the agents that they're paying. They don't have the lack of financial knowledge or foundation to make the right business moves. And a lot of them actually are taken advantage of because they don't have that knowledge. We see those stories all the time. And so because they made this large amount of money during their career doesn't mean that they have the money now. So, we can see Sebastian Telfair actually qualify for a court appointed attorney. Now, according to records, he made $19.5 million over his career, but he qualified for a court appointed attorney. If you qualify for a court appointed attorney, that means that your financial situation is not good. They look at your records, look at your income, they look at all those things before you actually get appointed to a court appointed attorney. So that goes to show that a lot of players, even though they made millions, they aren't living that millionaire lifestyle, especially once they're no longer in the league. And so I talk about this to kind of say that everything is based in having some kind of financial knowledge. We can only do what we know. If we don't know, we're making bad decisions. And it's really, in my experience and working in the fraud arena and the whole nine investigations, prosecutions, defense, there's really two type of people who participate in fraud to defraud programs. And oftentimes it's either or you're both. Either is someone who's greedy as hell. Those are the situations I think when you're really looking at the providers. The doctors who were submitting the false claims to the government are the people who are really greedy because a lot of times, and I've seen this, doctors make 300, $400,000 a year, but they still want to defraud a federal healthcare program for millions of more dollars because 300, $400, 400 million, 400 million, $400,000 isn't enough for them. So they want to get more. They want to get more. It may have started out as a mistake. They didn't get caught on it. They keep doing it, and it just grows and grows exponentially. So the greedy ass person is the first person who commit fraud. The second person who tries to commit fraud is the person who is in that back against the wall financial position. They may not have enough income to sustain their bills. They could be over leveraged by debt. And the third type of person is just a greedy ass broke person. But the reason that this is so problematic for everyone is because you know who flips the bill for that services? You, me, everybody who works, who pays taxes, who pays into these federal healthcare programs. When healthcare fraud or any fraud against a government program, I don't care if it's healthcare fraud, PPP fraud, all of that stuff, at the end of the day, the taxpayers pay for that because that is money that's given through taxpayer money that Congress said, hey, we funding this program with tax dollars. Someone defrauds it, and the person who loses out is me, you, all the taxpayers, all the law-abiding citizen. So it's just a crazy ass story. At the end of the day, though, hey, if you do the crime, you do the time. But it was crazy. The person who was allegedly was the head was Terrence Williams, and him and his wife got charged. That's even crazier. Like, okay, it's one thing to be a greedy ass person and you trying to defraud to come up on some cash. But if I'm doing something crazy, I mean, you got to do it mobster style. The mob's doing something crazy. If you're a mobster and you're doing something crazy, you make sure that the wife is far removed from it. So in the event if I get popped, you still there to hold the household down. So I think that's crazy as hell that husband and wife uh, were charged just as a matter of. I mean, it's common. I think it's just crazy as a matter of common sense and stupidity. I think that's a crazy approach. What I'm sure she probably was charged as an accessory. And so essentially, you have three ways you can be charged. You can be charged as an accessory before the fact. So you're an accessory before the crime is committed, an accessory during the fact as the crime is being committed, you're accessory, or an accessory after the fact. And if you're charged as an accessory during the fact, like during this fraud, she's helping to facilitate this fraud, you're going to get charged the same as the individual who actually committed the fraud. So that was point number one. I just wanted to talk about it. I thought it was just a good lesson to show that, man, just because people make a lot of money don't mean they're in a good financial situation. As we know from watching videos and things that I talk about, you could make $10 million and be in a worse financial situation than somebody who make $30,000. I mean, it sounds crazy, but hey, it is what it is. So definitely financial education is the key. Now, the second part I wanted to talk a little bit about is just cryptocurrency. Now, anybody out there who's been investing in the market this month has really been trash. And the funny thing is, historically, if you look at the month of September and October are typically not great months for the stock market. So the stock market's been real wishy washy this month, up, down, more down days than up. And so, as we deal with this fluctuation in the market, as Congress try to figure out if they raising the debt ceiling, if they because they can't even pay their damn bills, don't run your finances the way Congress runs the United States finances. But as we try to figure things out, I turned and looked and said, damn, look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is about to touch new all-time record highs. And this is crazy because just 4 months ago, China came out, hey, we're banning people from using Bitcoin. And all this news came out. I mean, the federal government were coming out with remarks that weren't favorable to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And you just see that it just rock bottomed out. I think Bitcoin got as low as 37 or $38,000, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, Ethereum went to like 1,800 or maybe lower than that, but it all went low as hell. And so 4 months ago, I actually did a video. I'll link the video above where I talked about, hey, this is why the crypto market is crashing, but this is also why I'm not worried. So that was 4 months ago. Let's fast forward now. Bitcoin is rushing to the top. You see all the other cryptocurrencies are slowly keeping pace and increasing. And so it's just crazy the difference when you're talking about cryptocurrency that a month can make, that 2 months can make, that 4 months can make. Because as we all know, as a volatile asset, it's not uncommon to see a 30-point gain one day and a 30-point loss in over a period of 2 or 3 days. But essentially, and again, this isn't financial advice. I'm only telling y'all what the debt free dad is doing. My track record, my approach to cryptocurrency is just to buy it, just to hold it, and just sit on it. Any Bitcoin, any cryptocurrency that I buy right now, I don't anticipate selling it for the next 2, 3, 5, 7, 10 years, unless it just shoots up like super crazy. And so I'm gonna take a look on the screen. Let's see. And I'm gonna post this image up. I'm looking at it on my phone, but this is a 1 month look at my crypto portfolio. Now, in this month, I only added about $150 to this portfolio. I bought some meme crypto I talk about at the end of the month when we go into a deep dive. But during this month, I only added a $150 allocation to this crypto portfolio. And you can see at one point, the low point was 2,800, $2,893 essentially was the low point for this month. And fast forward to today, as of the making of this video, the balance is worth, or the portfolio balance is worth $4,475. So again, my approach to cryptocurrency, because I'm not an expert in cryptocurrency, I don't over leverage myself in cryptocurrency. I'm not putting everything I own. I'm not taking out a loan on my house to invest in cryptocurrency, but I throw a little bit in every month, a little bit in every month, and I'm gonna just let it ride and see what happens and see how it plays out. And typically, when the market has volatility, it's not always true, but it's not always true, but it's most times true. Most times when the market isn't performing well, the crypto market performs stronger because it's deemed as not stable, but a hedge against inflation. So when you see inflation concerns and the market is going down, most times you'll look across the street and look at your crypto portfolio and you'll see that balance going up. So that portfolio is something that we started in February. That's kind of where it is right now. We'll talk a little bit about it later on at the end of the month. But that's all I wanted to talk about in this Free Game Friday. Athletes committing healthcare fraud is really greed. It's really greed and broke ass people trying to take advantage. And hey, if you're in the crypto market, remember it's volatile. Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't panic. Y'all take care. Be safe. Have a good weekend. Peace. And if you're still tuned into this video, check out the videos below to learn and follow more of my family's debt free journey and learn about finance. And if you haven't, hit that circle all the way to the right to subscribe to the channel.